Last week we were doing this talk about angelic perception, and the plan was to go on to this week and talk about perception of people. How do we have perception? And as I was thinking about it, I was thinking, we have this idea of women's intuition or women's perception, and it ties in fairly nicely to the subject. Because I think moms do have a certain kind of perception. And for me personally, I've always been fascinated with this kind of a subject because perception is always one of those kind of mysterious things where it's almost magical. And I remember I'm pretty sure I was about 4th grade, so a little bit younger than the boys here. I had this magazine, and it was a kids' educational magazine. And one month they had a story about ESP, extrasensory perception, and the idea that we could communicate through our minds and just, telepathy and put thoughts into other people's minds. And I found this was just absolutely amazing. Well, the kid who was the backdoor neighbor to us, they got the same magazine as well. And he was equally fascinated by this subject. And so we decided we would try to do this. We would practice up and we would try to communicate through our minds. Now, he was a grade above me, and so the plan was very simple, that when we got bored in school, that we would just communicate and just put the vibe through the air. Darren, can you hear me? Darren, can you hear me? Come in, Darren. This is me. This is Todd. Hear me. And so after doing this for a while, I remember after school being excited to go catch up with Darren and say, well, how did it go? Did you hear me? And he didn't. He didn't hear me, but he told me that he did have an unexplained headache at one point during the day. And that was enough to convince us that we were on the right track. Clearly this was just a breakthrough away from ESP. And despite some further attempts, and we never really got further than the mysterious, unexplained headache. But since then, I've always just had, thought these kind of things were pretty cool, because other people, they see auras, they see spirits of people who have gone before them, they've seen people who see animals, pets that have died. I know one person who could go into a room and smell things that nobody else could smell. And a lot of people, start wondering if they're crazy when they experience. Me, I don't think so. I think they've got some sort of a gift, something that's been left over from times past, that we're supposed to be able to see and do these things. And because of that, that opinion that I express, people tell me their stories. I get to hear even more weird stories than the average person, I think. So this leads me to believe that there's a lot more of this stuff happening out there than most of us expect. But my point is that this ESP stuff has always been happening. The story we used last week about angelic perception was the story about Abram. And Abram is met by these 3 angels, and he knows that they're special visitors. There's something about them. He can tell that they're not just people. He perceives something as special as happening, and he just sees them with his eyes. It's a very clear perception. It's not like it's something obscure, he's got to put it together. It's happening right in front of his face. When you look at Abraham's life, as it's recorded in Scripture, he has a few of these occasions. He's called by the Lord at the very beginning, saying, hey, leave your land, go to Canaan. He's told by the Lord, oh, you're going to have a baby, and yes, your wife's 99 years old, but it's going to happen. He's got a further meeting with the Lord where they talk and say where it's going to happen with his son Isaac. So, it happens a few times with Abraham. What the writings tell us is that Abraham represents a kind of living where love to the Lord is our primary purpose. That's what we do. We go through life trying to please the Lord. And so what I want to start to draw up a picture here for you is watch this family tree and these representations, and we'll see that the more that we are in these higher loves, the greater perception that we're going to have. Because his son Isaac also has an encounter with the Lord. It's only one, and it comes during a time when Isaac and his men are digging a well. So they go out in this land, they dig a well, and these people come up and say, hey, this is our land, you can't have a well here. So Isaac and his men, they pick up, and they go somewhere else, dig a well. Those same guys say, no, this is our land too, this is our land too. Isaac picks up his stuff, and he goes somewhere else, and he digs a third well. And finally, everybody's happy with this third location, and nobody's disputing the ownership of the land. And the Lord appears to Isaac after that, and he says, I am the God of your father Abraham. Do not fear, for I am with you. I will bless you and multiply your descendants for my servant Abraham's sake. But that's it. That's the only time we have an encounter between the Lord or an angel or anything and Isaac. Notice that the perception is less with Isaac. But Isaac's representation is love to the neighbor. So it's still a very good love, but it's a notch down from loving the Lord. The next perception that happens in the scriptures is with Jacob, Isaac's son. And I want to read you this. Where is it here? So yeah, here it is. So Isaac's son Jacob is running from Esau, and he camps for the night. It's this famous story about the Jacob's ladder. So Jacob's on the run, and he sees these angels going up and down the ladder in a vision. And what Secrets of Heaven has to tell us is a bit about the internal sense of what's going on here. And this is in the order of service, number 3702. It says, the arcanum which lies concealed in the internal sense of these words is that all goods and truths descend from the Lord and ascend to him. That is, he is the first and the last. For man has been so created that the divine things of the Lord may descend through him down to the ultimates of nature, and from the ultimates of nature may ascend to him, so that man may be a medium that unites the divine with the world of nature, and the world of nature with the divine, and that thus the very ultimate nature of nature, might live from the divine through man as the uniting medium, which would be the case if man had lived according to divine order. Well, divine order is loving Lord as, primary goal. So Abraham was in that divine order. And just to be clear, ultimates of nature, that's this world. So when he's saying, Lord in the spiritual world, and he flows down from the heavens, this world of spirits, bang, this is where it all terminates. This is the ultimate. So he's saying that people are supposed to be this connection to this world and to the Lord, and vice versa. It's this reciprocation between the two, and that's the way it's supposed to be. The number goes on, though, and it gets even more interesting. All right? That man, or people were so created, is evident from the fact that as to the body, he is a little world. For all the arcana, all the secrets of the world, of nature, are stored within him. For every hidden property there is in the ether and its modifications is stored within the eye. And every property in the air is stored within the ear. And whatever invisible thing floats and acts in the air is in the organ of smell where it is perceived. And whatever invisible thing there is in water and other fluids is in the organ of taste. And the very changes of state are in the sense of touch everywhere in the body. Besides that, things are still more hidden, would be perceived in his interior organs, if his life were in accordance with order. Hence it is evident that there would be a descent of the divine through man into the ultimate of nature, and from the ultimate of nature there would be an ascent to the divine. If with faith of heart, that as with love, man would only acknowledge the Lord as his first and last end. All right, so you can see I've highlighted the line there. Besides that, things still more hidden would be perceived in his interior organs if his life were in accordance with order. So there's a there's a call there, I think, a call there to be more in order, just to make the Lord the first and the last end. Can you imagine, what your life would be like if you could perceive the unseen world differently? How many of us miss people who've passed on? Could we sense that better if our world was in more order? When we follow this family line, so that's Jacob, right? And so the perception is different. It's not face to face, kind of like with Abraham was. It's not a calling with Isaac. With Jacob, we now have a dream is the communication. All right, so it's still moving farther away. And Jacob still represents a good love. It's a love of doing what he's told, a love of order. But it's still not where it's supposed to be, not what it truly means. The next in the family line is Joseph. All right? Joseph doesn't have God appear to him. But when he's 17 years old, he has a dream. And he tells the dream to his brothers and his father, and they get angry with him. This is the dream where it's the binding of the sheaves. So they have all the straw, they bind it up, and the sheaves bow to him. And he tells this to his father and his brothers, and the brothers respond saying, "Shall you indeed reign over us, or shall you indeed have dominion over us?" The second dream is very similar. It's the stars, and they all bow to him. And they also know what this dream means. They say, "What is this dream you have dreamed? Shall your mother and I and your brothers indeed come to bow to the earth before you?" So Jacob's got his vision. Joseph's got dreams. Joseph's family gets it. They understand these dreams. But then when Joseph is sold into slavery, he ends up in Egypt. Pharaoh has a dream. Right? Pharaoh has a dream, and nobody knows what it means. Here's the story. It's from Genesis 41. It's in your order of service. "Now it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled, and he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt and all its wise men. And Pharaoh told them his dreams, but there was no one who could interpret them for Pharaoh. Then the chief butler spoke to Pharaoh, saying, 'I remember my faults this day, when Pharaoh was angry with his servants, and he put me in the custody in the house of the captain of the guard, both me and the chief baker. We each had a dream in one night, he and I. Each of us dreamed according to the interpretation of his own dream. Now there was a young Hebrew man with us there, a servant of the captain of the guard. And we told him, and he interpreted our dreams for us. To each man he interpreted according to his own dream. And it came to pass, just as he interpreted for us, so it happened. He restored me to my office, and he hanged him.' Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him quickly out of the dungeon. And he shaved, changed his clothing, and came to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, 'I have had a dream, and there is no one who can interpret it. But I have heard it said that you can understand a dream to interpret it.' So Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, 'It is not me. God will give Pharaoh an answer of peace.'" So what I'm trying to draw your attention to here is that Joseph was the only one who had access to the interpretation. Just not that many chapters ago, Joseph says the dream to his family, and they all get it. Everybody gets it. But now, nobody knows. Pharaoh conjures up his magicians, his wise, everybody who's supposed to know something in Egypt. But nobody can crack this dream. You notice that this dream, the imagery in Pharaoh's dream isn't that different. It's the fat cows that are eaten by the skinny cows. And then he's got the dream about you got the big sheaves, and then the other skinny sheaves eat it. It's not complex imagery or any more obscure than Joseph's was. But nobody gets it. Nobody gets it. So why not? Well, from what I understand, it's about of where they are. When Joseph has his dreams, they're in the Holy Land. When Pharaoh has his dreams, they're in Egypt. So Egypt representing worldly concerns. It's all about factual knowledge, about the here and now, and being immersed in that. Canaan, back where Jacob is still about heaven. It's about a spiritual way of living. So the representation as to why Pharaoh can't understand this dream is because he's immersed in the world. And this is what Secrets of Heaven 1389 tells us. He says, during a person's lifetime, the objects of the senses are flowing in, and also delusions arising from those things which as a consequence are fixed in the memory, in addition to anxieties over the future, various desires aroused by things of an external nature, concern about food, clothing, shelter, children, and many other matters to which they give no thought at all in the next life. And those obstacles and hindrances have therefore been removed, along with bodily things that are part of mere physical sensation. People enter inevitably into a more perfect state. The same capabilities remain, but these are far more perfect, clear, and unrestricted. This is especially so with those who have lived in charity and faith in the Lord, and also in innocence. Their capabilities are heightened enormously, way above what they had had during the lifetime, till at length they come up to the angelic capabilities of the third heaven. So to me, what this is saying is that if we could just let go of our concerns about the world, we could have a much better perception of things here and now. But as long as we kind of remain in Egypt, access to the Lord is much more difficult. I don't know if you ever heard of a man named Edgar Cayce. He was an American psychic back in the early 1900s. He's a fascinating story. He's the world's most documented psychic. I went to his museum back in Virginia, and it's got a whole wall of books of every psychic reading he ever did in the course of his life. It's all written out. And during his life, people asked him, well, how do you do this? How is this happening? And he says, well, you could do it too, but you have to be willing to make the sacrifices to do it. You've got to, eat properly. You've got to have your focus on the people you're working for and not yourself, and all this regimen of very much a disciplined life of not caring about food, clothing, shelter, children, and many other matters to which they give no thought to at all in the next life. You have that list of angelic concerns. And Edgar Cayce apparently was able to get that. So to me, this idea that we can have some perception here makes some sense if we're willing to make the adjustments in our life that are necessary for that. But as we finish up here, I want to bring this back to Mother's Day. Because of this idea of women's intuition, a lot of people think it's this psychic kind of stuff that, like Edgar Cayce had. And so the question, is women's intuition a myth or is it reality? And when I was poking around on this question this week, the answer is to all these bloggers and writers that, oh, no, it's not hocus pocus psychic ability. It's just that women have a better ability to discern somebody's state because they pick up on the more subtle facial and emotional cues that are put off by a person. They read faces better, and as a result, they pick up on these more subtle emotional messages, is what they're saying. And I kind of like that answer because this is the kind of answer about perception we've been talking about between last week and a bit this week. That this perception isn't just magic stuff floating in your mind of aha, I know. Angelic perception is, no, I see this to be true. I hear this. It's something much more tangible. And so the idea that women have this ability to pick up on subtle facial cues, that's a perception of this world that is real, and it's tangible. And that's the kind of perception that the angels have. It's right there in front of his face. It says here that the women are also better at expressing emotions through their facial expressions, tone of voice and body, and that men are better at controlling emotions and hiding behind a poker face. And this is evidence that women are seen as more empathetic than men, which, I really wouldn't argue with. And because they're more empathetic, they're more open to others' emotional messages. I think that the reality is that mothers perhaps have this ability better than most, because when you have a person in your womb and you give birth to that person, there is a connection there that wouldn't be there otherwise. You hear about how twins have a connection with each other. Well, I think that probably the same principle applies between a mother and a child, and that those spirits have somehow become intertwined. And that's why the mothers care for their kids so much. I remember when Zach was born, and I knew my mother loved me, and I loved my mother. But when I had my own son and I realized how much I loved my kid, it was like, oh, whoa, this is how much my mother loved me? This is different. This is not what I had sorted out. Thankfully, we get to hopefully experience during the course of our life that experience of how much a mother does love us. Men can still want the world. Men can still want to be in Egypt. We like that. But thankfully, for all of us children, there's Mom. There's that Joseph figure around who that even in the midst of Egypt can make sense of things that we can't make sense of. So I thought that was a way of thinking about Mother's Day and the perception that hopefully we can all appreciate. Amen.